Hey everybody, this is Scott Stollar with Keller Williams. I wanted to bring you a market update for Q4 2025. Heading into Q4, there's been a lot of questions lately because everyone is seeing the shift in the market. And because the news around real estate, interest rates, inflation, and the jobs market has been so hyper scrutinizing of the situation that we're in, I wanted to bring some clarity of how that national news is actually affecting home buyers and sellers here in North County, San Diego. So let's take a look and let's start off with the GDP. Does anyone watching this feel like things are maybe expensive right now? The crazy thing is that things are expensive just because of inflation. And we're seeing that in the GDP being down. We're not to the level where recessions happen, but we are getting signs saying that consumers are feeling that everything is expensive. There's a lot of uncertainty in our market right now and in the world that we're living in. A lot of that uncertainty is actually coming from the unemployment rate. If you've talked to me in the last 6 months and you ask me what's going on with the housing market, I've told you to look at the jobs market. What we're seeing towards the end here of summer with the job market is that the unemployed people, where you see in like mint green blue line, is actually getting really close suddenly to the available job openings. That means that people are offering fewer jobs, there are fewer jobs available. When companies offer fewer jobs and they realize that the amount of jobs available are getting close to the number of unemployed people, they actually start pulling jobs back because that creates uncertainty for the labor markets because interest rates are high. And when interest rates are high, it makes it more expensive to hire people and get your operating capital. Now, uncertainty, when that comes down to the individual, let's take a look at that really quick. Since everything feels really expensive, houses feel very expensive, and there's uncertainty in the labor market, people are wondering, number one, will I be able to continue to pay for this expensive thing that I just bought, like the house? They're also wondering that even if I could continue to pay for it, will it be easy to sell in a few months? And if I need to sell it in a few months, will it be worth as much as I paid for it? There's uncertainty there, and that's what causes some buyer hesitation. And we're not hearing that in the national news because we're mainly hearing about interest rates and how those affect the mortgage market. And it's almost like it's presented to us that the minute that the Fed announces that they're going to lower rates, there's a switch that gets flipped and interest rates on your mortgage magically drop. The truth is that those Fed meetings, they're more closely tied to the overnight rate. And that's going to affect real estate, but more in the commercial sector. In the residential sector, which is important to you, the interest rates for mortgages are more tied to the T-bill rate and the long-term rate. So that's why we're not seeing that crazy fluctuation. We see fluctuations every day in the mortgage market, but it's in response to things like this that are leading indicators to what would make the Fed want to lower rates or make adjustments like that. The Fed has two levers. They have the employment market and they also have interest rates. They need to balance those out so that they don't let the job openings expand so much or the unemployed people rise to a level that creates a recession before they lower rates. So they're really creating this balancing act right here. And we're in a situation where so many people think that something's about to break, but it just hasn't yet. And they're wondering when, and they're grabbing for gold or they're grabbing for other items just for that security because signs point to this shouldn't be working, but it somehow is still. So, like I said, with those interest rates coming down or coming down a bit, one of the best things that we have for that is ours. Right now, adjustable rate mortgages are back like you wouldn't believe. Some people are afraid of them, but they're actually one of the best tools right now. For example, there's a 5-1 arm, meaning that you have a fixed rate for 5 years, and then it adjusts on a 12-month cycle every 12 months after that, and it's tied to the SOFI rate. With that 5-1 arm, you can actually get a rate of 4.8% with 5% down up to $2 million. That is insane. Now, part of what's happening with this is that when there's volatility in the interest rates and when banks start to think that rates are going to come down, they start giving these arms again as kind of teaser rates to see what applications they can get in so that they're not doing a bunch of applications right when the news hits that rates are lower. And when you think about this, there's a rate buy down. So the seller can actually buy down the rate for the buyer. And as a seller, this doesn't cost you more. It's mostly on the buyer side in the way that the buyer's willing to pay for the home. Now, let's say, for example, your home is selling for $1 million, and the lender tells this buyer that to buy down their rate on a 3-2-1 buy down, for example, they need to have a credit of $40,000. So instead of writing you an offer for $1 million, they write the offer for $1,040,000. That way, they get the credit back from you as a seller. The seller still nets the same amount of money, but the buyer is able to use that to buy down their rate. Now, if you're doing a 3-2-1 buy down on a rate that's already at 4.8%, that means that the first year you're going to be making a payment as if your interest rate was 1.8%, 2.8% for the second year, 3.8% for the third year, and then 4.8% for the following years 4 and 5, where it adjusts again. Now, a lot of people think that this is kind of a risky play, which there is some risk to it, but keep in mind, these arms are not the negative amortization arms that we had in the past. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was governor, yep, remember that? He was our governor. He actually made it illegal for negative amortization loans to be here in California. So the risk becomes that you're gambling that in sometime in that 5-year period, the interest rate you get is going to be lower at a refi than your purchase money. And a lot of people get really nervous about that. But the things that should put some minds at ease here are there's 5-year arms, there's 7-year arms, 10-year arms. We're talking about 30-year loans here, but barely anyone takes a 30-year loan to term. That's why when you look at an amortization schedule, most of the interest is towards the beginning of the loan. They get paid for their loan long before you refinance it. The average person in this country also sells their home between 7 and 10 years of ownership, which means that you may refi once if it makes sense, if you're able to see what that rate can adjust up to, because there are some limitations on it. Maybe you can make that work. Maybe instead of spending that money, if you can afford the 4.8%, but you buy down the rate because it makes sense and save that difference. There are so many ways for buyers to handle this right now. And as a seller, that's super important for you to realize, because when we look at new home starts nationally, there's the highest amount of unsold inventory in new home starts than there's been in the past 15 years. Now, remember, 15 years ago, builders quit building homes because there weren't enough people buying them, which put us in the situation where we're in now, where there wasn't enough inventory during COVID to go around. Supply and demand happened. Prices went through the roof because there's not a lot of homes and money's really cheap to borrow. So new construction is doing some creative things, and they're offering lower rates because sometimes they're able to carry the note, or they're selling such volume that they're able to get a better deal from the lenders themselves, or they're doing what you could do as a seller, and they're actually buying down that rate for the buyer. They're charging more for the home from the end user, and they're using those extra proceeds to buy down the rate to make it so it's less expensive to buy a home per month. Keep in mind, when people buy a home, they're not buying the price of the home. They're not buying the interest rate. They're buying the payment. Now, going back on that, I'd almost be willing to bet that while you're sitting there, if I asked you if you could go back 20 years and buy every piece of real estate in your town that you would raise your hand saying, yeah, Scott, I absolutely would. So if we look at this chart on annual home prices, we're still above the trend quite a bit. The long-term trend, as you can see, in the United States is 4%. San Diego County, we're a little bit higher, 5.5%, but this still suffices as a great example. So if you agree that 20 years ago you would buy every piece of real estate available in town, then that means that you would have gone back to the height of the market and bought every piece of real estate then. Now, of course, we know if we held on to it, we'd have this giant run up. And that's the mindset that's helping buyers win right now. Some of them understands that there's this big potential in building wealth in real estate. And let's say that you're in that boat, that you actually bought real estate 20 years ago. Your kids love the house, but now they're adults. They moved out. The home's too big for you. And you're sitting on a ton of equity. In many cases, people in North County are facing over $1 million in capital exposure. And they don't want to sell just because they don't want to write a check to the government, no matter who's in office. And part of why they don't want to write that check is because as soon as they write that check, they now can't afford the home that they need to move into. So we actually have some solutions for that. So if you're in that situation or think you're close, ask me for an updated valuation for your home so we can get it penciled out perfectly. And that way, if you do have over $1 million in capital gains on your primary, we can create a strategy to help defer those and use those deferments to actually pay for your next mortgage, even if you're retired. What buyers are noticing right now, I think it's really funny because I hear a lot of buyers in one breath complaining that flippers have all the homes for sale right now. And there are a lot of homes that are flipped. And when they see that, they respond with, wow, I wish I could just find that great opportunity and do it myself. But then when they find a home that needs a little bit of love, they think that it needs more work than it actually does because outside of watching HGTV, they've never done a remodel before. Remodels can be pretty intrusive and gnarly, to put it simply, but oftentimes a lot of these homes can have light cosmetic remodels and you can get a great home that's comfortable, beautiful, with great mechanical systems, great bones for not that much money. And buyers just aren't seeing the value there, or they're undervaluing it. And it's all because of affordability and that perception that things are expensive right now. So if we look here, North County specifically, we can see that average sales prices year to date, year over year, have been pretty flat. And that's going to start helping the affordability portion to an extent. And then having that solution with the mortgage, with the arms of buying down the rate, understanding how that works for buyers and sellers can actually give you an advantage no matter where you are and help you get out ahead of this affordability. So if you're thinking about buying a home, but you're wondering when things are going to be affordable again, and you think that you can just wait for rates to drop, you don't have to. You can actually get out ahead of it right now. And if you're a seller wondering when the right time to sell is, you can actually leverage the same thing to create a win-win situation before prices get downward pressure. Because the things that we're watching right now are the same as before. We're watching inflation, we're watching the employment data. And if we keep in mind that the news and the media has been so hypercritical of anything coming out with real estate, home values, interest rates, inflation, employment, etc., we need to keep in mind that the stuff that we're going to see is going to be very one-sided or the other. And we got to find that truth somewhere in the middle. What I'm watching out for right now is if we see inflation or employment data that makes headlines in a way that surprises people. Those are going to be the leading indicators, but we may be at a point with the data that we're seeing now that if you wait for that, it could be too late. Now, another leading indicator is percentage of original list price received. Now, this is basically saying that if you list that home for $1 million in 2023, you'd probably get most of that $1 million. But now you're getting even less. And the important thing to keep in mind is that this is an average. So homes that are priced appropriately are still getting multiple offers and they're still getting over that 100%. But homes that are not priced appropriately, the prices are coming down. There's price adjustments and things like that. We're in a place right now where buyers need to see how a home's priced and how that makes sense in the market. If it makes sense, there are going to be multiple people going after it. The same for sellers. If you're trying to price too high and you're pricing at the market where all of the comps look like you should be priced this way, we're in a situation where unfortunately that's old news and old data. You need to price in a way that leads the market to stay competitive right now. Inventory of homes for sale has laid relatively flat. We got that bump from 23 to 24 that everyone's like, all right, great, here we go. The bubble's going to pop. It still hasn't popped. But what we're seeing is in San Diego County, a normal market is about 3 to 4 months of inventory, which is what we're seeing right now. 3 to 4 months of inventory, that's like 2016, 2017 levels. So before the pandemic. So if you're looking for normal, we're pretty close to normal right now. The outliers that we're looking at are on the broader economy and how those affect things. Also, if we look up closed sales are actually trending up. Pending sales are up as well. So that means that some of the buyers are still understanding that there's value and it's a great time to buy. Some people think that right now is the time to buy because if they wait, interest rates will come down, the market will be flooded with buyers, and then prices will go bonkers again. So we have a bit of gambling and people just trying to play the market. The important thing is this is the information. Understand how it applies to your situation, whether you're buying or selling, and how it affects you. If you have any questions about this, just respond to this email. I'd be happy to walk you through it. And even if we just talked last month about your home value and you're trying to get a plan for transitioning to what's next, let's talk about it. This fourth quarter could be the prime time. And to quote Lexus, this may actually be a December to remember. So let's keep that in mind. Remember that we don't get the typical cycles here in Southern California just because we're not in a market that snows. We do get the slowdowns from Halloween into Thanksgiving, and then again, Thanksgiving all the way to about January 4th. After that, we start seeing more homes coming on the market. And if you're thinking about coming to market next year, it's important to be strategic about that and talk about some of these strategies so that we could actually help buyers. Because if we help each other, we all win more. That's helping a buyer buy the home that you're trying to sell. If you're a buyer, that's helping the seller get what they need so that you get what you need. We need to create win-win situations in a market that's tough like this because that's the best way to move forward and get you what you need. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you paying attention. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.